Good morning, Houston and YouTube world. Welcome to the Massive Passive Show. This is one of your hosts, James Haney, and I'm here with another co-host, Ray Sasser. Good morning, Ray. How are we doing?
We're doing wonderful. We're missing one of our cohorts, though, aren't we?
We are, but he's here with us in spirit.
Yeah, but I like him to be here because I really like picking on Pat.
Yeah, he is a good one to pick on. But today,
and he gives back as good as he takes. You know, some people don't take it; they just go and mope and cry.
Yeah. But I'll play that part of Pat today. I'll
can pick on you,
and I'll pick back too.
I'm not a professional speaker, and anybody that's heard me speak in front of a group knows that's the case. But I actually am getting to where I like picking on the audience. So if you're ever in the audience, just consider it's normal for me to pick on you. And I like challenging people because that's when you really find out where people are. It's almost like if you live an unchallenged life or an uninspected life, you're not living life to the point where it needs to be lived. You're not pushing yourself hard enough. So we should welcome challenge.
Yes, challenge is welcome.
And that, by the way, I know that's not on our sheet here, and you're thinking, like, oh my God, Ray starts in a rabbit hole. He doesn't even go down the rabbit hole. He's already in the rabbit hole.
He lives in the rabbit hole. So now that we're out of that rabbit hole, today's show, we got an exciting show. And in fact, right now, as you're hearing this, we are at our monthly main meeting. And we have Tom Berry here with us today, and he's a very special friend of the RIA, and he's going to be talking about how he built his rental portfolio of 400 units in just 4 years, starting from scratch. So he's going to be sharing his secrets on that. The location is 1001 West Loop South, and that's Houston 77027. When you get here, park on the 7th floor of the parking garage, and we'll have signs guiding you to where we are. And then also this afternoon, the meeting's going to end at 12, and then we'll break for lunch. And then at 1:15, he's going to do a special workshop for those who are interested in that. To dive a little bit deeper into some of his secrets.
And if they're hearing this show and then they decide to come here, you'll be here in time to listen to Tom if you get in your buggy and get here as quick as possible. But you'll missed out on the networking that it's at the beginning of the meeting. There's always networking afterwards. And you'll missed out on the tacos. I'm sure there won't be any tacos left by the time you get here.
There definitely wasn't any last time.
Right. And y'all guys are supposed to save those a couple tacos for me. And somebody's dropping the ball on that.
Well, we'll make sure that you have a couple extra tacos. All right. So today's show, we're going to talk. We have a lot of stuff. Just like we do every show, we try to. And one other thing that we forgot to mention, handicap parking is on the 6th floor of the parking garage. Did want to make sure to throw that in there. So today's show, we're going to be talking a lot about why real estate and how real estate, and it's going to kind of tie into what the meeting and the workshop is about today. So they're going to go hand in hand together, and then we'll also talk some strategies and stuff as far as using like retirement accounts. And everything like that. I do want to mention that if you are looking for one of our vendors or our sponsors for the radio show, you can always go to massivepassiveshow.com. That's massivepassiveshow.com. And if you're on your mobile device, there's 3 bars that you'll just hit, and it'll be a drop-down menu, and it'll be find a vendor, and then just submit some basic information, and you'll get the vendor information. So I just wanted to point that out. Again, that's massivepassiveshow.com. Anything that we reference, upcoming events, coaching, vendors, anything like that, YouTube channel, Facebook groups, all of that stuff that we do, I know it's a lot, it can be found at massivepassiveshow.com.
Yeah, and I think it's worth going to because we have our sponsors are dedicated to the success of real estate investors, and that's why we picked them. They know how to work with real estate investors, and we've got them anywhere from expertise, services, tradespeople, and if it's something you're interested in and we can verify that you have a good reputation, we'll consider getting you out there. And a lot of those people we use, either Pat or I or James uses, and we have firsthand knowledge of them. And some of these guys are just great, just like one of our guys, I won't say who it is, but he was recently in the hospital, and I know he was taking my son's phone calls because he says, I'm in the hospital. But we needed to know the answer to a question. And so we call him, and then that's when we find out he's running his business on the side of his hospital bed. But that's what it takes. People they've got to be all in. If you're not all in fact, I told a guy that used to work for us, I said, I don't work around 8 to 5 people. I've never worked around 8 to 5 people. There's nobody in my life that's 8 to 5. And if they're 8 to 5, I either whip them into shape or I whip them out. So, but you're either all in or you're not in. And life, we just had a major partner of ours pass away, and she was young. She's 45 years old, Sharon Fernandez. And it just, I have to say something because she had such a powerful impact on me. And if I could give Sharon top credit for anything, is she played hard and she worked hard. She did both, and she had fun wherever she was. Very engaging, and we all have that knew her like I did. All have a hole in our heart where she was. I mean, she's still in our hearts, I guess. But we're really, really sorry to see her go. But you know what? She got every bit of life out of every minute, and I think you should do it. And even working hard is fun if it's what you want to do. So, and it's for you. It's for you and your family and your future. The rest of your family. So,
well, Ray, let me just give you a little comfort here. Sharon's still going to be in your life. My sister passed away almost about 8 years ago, and she's still in my life, and she still impacts people in their lives today. So Sharon is still going to be with you, and everybody that she had an impact on. I didn't know her quite as well. I've only met her a few times, but the times that I was around her on the phone with her, I could tell. So I just wanted to give you that comfort right quick. So let's go ahead and jump into the show, because like we always do, we have a jam-packed show. We try to get through everything we can, but it really depends on how many rabbit holes Ray decides to go down.
We won't finish. There is no finishing, is there? Life is not a destination. Goal really isn't a destination. It's a journey. How do you want to take that journey? And some people say, well, are you going to retire? It's like, why would you take? It's not about the destination. It's just how you spend your time and how you spend your life and who you choose to hang out with, because that that group defines you.
So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna talk about. Let's go ahead and first of all, really quick, because that's kind of easy. Why real estate?
You said we were going to talk about that, and we can talk about that for a long time. But I was just thinking, gas prices. Doesn't it seem like gas prices were? It seems like yesterday they were $1.50, and now you're seeing $3.99. That's if you use cheap gas like I do, and it's like, isn't that amazing how fast that changed?
It is.
And as you're going through it, you're thinking it's not changing that fast. But in retrospect, it's like we had this incredible cheap gas, and then all of a sudden it's $4, and it's like that changes rules. All these people that are now that are living out in the sticks, 50, 70, 80 miles out of town. It's like they're sucking wind. They're looking for any kind of oxygen they can to, like, how am I even going to get back and forth to work or to where the job sites are? And it's changing everything. And that's what happens with real estate. It changes constantly. It's never static. In fact, in real estate in Texas and most states, you pay a property tax. So if an asset, real estate is either an asset or it's not an asset. In fact, let me restate that. I said that wrong. Real estate is either an asset or a liability. And that's what makes opportunities for everybody. A person might think an apartment complex is hands off and they don't manage it properly. And that thing that's supposed to be an asset, that's supposed to generate income, because it's improperly managed or mismanaged, all of a sudden becomes a liability. and something that's worth an apartment complex is really good because it works off of the value, the capitalization rate, the value of that property is directly proportional to the income it generates. So if it's net, and we want to call it net operating income because that's the most important. So if the net operating income drops in half, that value basically drops in half. It's not that simple, but I mean, it's a good way to think about it. So mismanagement, improper management, not optimizing things. Like it used to be, you could rent a house for $1,000 a month. With Airbnb, you can turn around, if it's the right kind of house, you can rent it for $4,000. In fact, that's what we're doing with one of our houses. We just turned to Airbnb. It's $1,200. We're just starting this learning curve, and we're really. I'm going as hard as I can every free minute, becoming an expert on that, because I see the value of that, and that same $1,200 house is now generating $4,000 of income. It's not net income, but it's if you look at our net income on a rental and versus compare that to Airbnb, it's 7 to 8 times higher than what we would get on net income. It's several times higher. So learning, if you have an asset and it's not properly managed, and that one we rented for 3 years at $1,200 a month, and we said this is like the location, the type of property is just perfect for getting that X factor, that X4, that X6. And when you start thinking about that, you're saying, am I getting the best return on my assets that I can? And so why real estate? Because anybody that wakes up one day can dial into that and become a part of that. They can say, look, that apartment complex is not being managed properly, or it's in the wrong place and it's being used wrong, or the class of renter, whether it's A, B, C, D type property, that class of renter. And I'm not talking about apartments. I'm just talking about things that either can be an asset or a liability. And if you can change it from something that's underperforming or not performing at all to something that is performing, that now you're increasing net operating income. Once you increase net operating income, you're increasing value. Look up cap rate. We're not going to go through it on the radio, but look up cap rate, and to me it's the most beautiful formula there is on investment real estate. Once you understand it, it's kind of confusing at first, but once you understand it, once you get it in your head, then you realize net operating income is absolutely totally tied to value. So all you got to think of is, how do I make that more valuable? And an income property is, how do I increase the income? And there's 100 ways to do that. And that's something, as RIA owners and RIA leaders, that's something we are always going to be focusing on. You know, we use, what's our favorite acronym? Well, my favorite is something else, but what's our second most favorite acronym?
Well, we have several. We have CALM and MFO.
Yeah.
And that's monster for outcomes. The PG.
MF can be what you want it to be. It depends on how mad you are.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying yourself and having a casual dinner, it's monster for outcomes. If you're kicking buckets because jobs aren't getting done on time and you're going to make that deadline, then it might stand for something else, right? So, but CALM is about knowledge, attitude, leads, and money. And the leads, getting leads and learning where these assets that aren't performing, those are opportunities for us. So, and maybe I jumped way ahead of where we wanted to go today, but to me, real estate boils down into like 5 categories. It's going to be either cash flow, equity capture, appreciation, mortgage reduction, or tax advantages. Do you want to talk about each one of those for a minute or two?
Yeah, we can spend a couple minutes on those.
Okay, so let's just look at cash flow. That's the number one, probably the number one reason why people do rental properties, or they'll buy an asset and then they'll resell it, but they'll either resell it and make money on the front end, or they'll resell it and make money over the life of the loan. They'll create a note, and sometimes they'll do both. If we can do both, and that's what we try to do. We try to, in every situation, we try to optimize the outcome, and it's partly involved in like where we are in the deal, what the value of the deal is, the partners we bring in the deal, how we negotiate for that. And if we can do those things right and optimize that outcome, we can take what's with some people an average deal or even a deal that nobody else will touch, and we can turn that into a real money maker for us and our family, and whoever our partners are. So those are things that we want to talk about regularly. We do that in our RIA. We do that in our coaching brainstorm sessions, because we do coaching calls every week, and we'll go through those and we'll say, okay, is this the best outcome? Is this the highest use? Are we taking all of these benefits that real estate brings to the table? So the most obvious one, of course, is cash flow. It's like cash now and cash later, and rental might shed $200-$300, maybe $400 of rental income for 20 years or 30 years. Maybe a master lease would do the same thing. Maybe an option could do the same thing. Maybe a buy something and then wrap it. In other words, buy it at one price and sell it at another price. That difference is what we keep. And we figure out, your job is to figure out how to calculate what these numbers are. So we can, if we have, let's say we have, in its most simplest form, say you have two ways to do something, which way is better, plan A or plan B? Now, the guys that are more experienced and the guys that are students of the game, like I've been a student in this game for 40 years, they might have more than two ways. They might have 5 ways. And it might be that 90% of them are one way. Like, for example, the Burr method. That was my number one way. It was my first way. And then my next way was to flip. Well, we went back to the Burr method because it's just a spectacular way to do real estate. But it's not the only way to do real estate. But it's going to be a default way to do a lot of the transactions. But if we have opportunities to make even better deals, like doing sub twos instead of doing Burr, then we're going to do it, because there's some definite advantages to sub two over Burr, and there's also some definite disadvantages. So we'll just have to look at each one of those. And we try to bring experts to the table in our RIA meetings to talk about that kind of stuff on a regular basis. And I don't think we've ever talked about this. A lot of RIA meetings are investor group meetings. What it really is you go to those meetings, you go around and they provide free booze or free drinks, and you meet with people and you network. And a lot of those people that go to those things, they go there for one reason, to get free drinks and to hang out, and see who has the biggest boots. And we don't do that. Our goal is to really do two things. One is to, in our RIA meetings, is to network for sure. There's no question. Controlled, smart networking can make a huge difference. And a lot of people, they go networking and they think, well, networking means I'm just going to go talk to 2 of my buddies and see what they've done over the last week. That's not what we mean by power networking. And then the other thing that we try to do in our meeting is provide timely, important content for people who are serious about being investors. Because if you think about any kind of association, and that's what it stands for, Real Estate Investor Association, RIA. If you think about any association, that's what associations are supposed to do. They're supposed to educate and promote and keep their members on track and not get off track. And when you think of gas prices changing from $1.50 to $4, literally in a blink of an eye, the rules are changing. They're dramatically changing. We're talking about really, really high inflation numbers. Well, interest rates do something when you have high inflation. It's not a guess. I mean, you can go back and look at the historical data for 50 years, and you can see what's going to happen with interest rates as a result of that. Either inflation is going to come down real quick or interest rates are going to go up. There's no two ways about it. And so as we're providing content and we're providing thought people like Tom Barry thinks about this stuff. Tom Barry goes around the country. He's also a lender to a certain class of investors. We want to listen to what Tom has to say. We want to hear how he's going to structure, where he's going to be, what he's going to be doing. And this, you want to be on the forefront of the changes. You don't want to be after the changes, because in 2007, all the wholesalers went out of business. All the lenders went out of business. The buy and hold guys survived. Okay, and when I say all, I mean 90% or more means all. So I'm sure if you're one of the 10%, you're going to want to correct me. Some survive, but if they weren't paying attention and they didn't have sound business practices, they didn't survive. And you need to know how that affects you, and that you're going to get that at the RIA. So that's number one. Is that my 1 minute on cash flow?
Yeah, that was, I think, 30 minutes. No. No, I wanted to go back and say a couple things on the networking. You know, you really don't, a lot of people underestimate the power of networking. But, you know, if you just go and just hang out and, you know, you just exchange a business card or exchange phone numbers, and then that's all you do, you're not going to get anywhere. You know, you got to follow up and, you know, maybe take them to Starbucks, take them to lunch, and continue to be in contact with them, because you never know, you know, who you meet. You know, it could be, you know, one of your next partners on a deal. They could be one of your next buyers. They could be one of your contractors. Who knows? They could be the one that helps save that deal. And go ahead.
Well, I was just on my way here. I had to go to the bank, and I was talking to our banker. Guy's name's Nick at Independent Bank, and he was telling me something I didn't know about how to operate when you operate a business with checks, and just where your liability ends, where your liability begins. And I'm glad I spent the time talking to him about that, because he taught me a couple things that I didn't know. And I was listening to a show the other day, and somebody said the number one asset in the world, the most valuable asset in the world, and when they first said it, I was like, I don't think like that. And they said it's knowledge. And it's like, it really is, because knowing when to do something, knowing how to do something, it's almost like, think about if you could go back in time and you knew who was going to win the Kentucky Derby, right? You'd know how to bet, and your financial woes would be over. Well, knowledge, that is knowledge. It's like people consistently make good decisions, and people consistently make bad decisions. And it's the way people deal with information and knowledge. And you might think that you know everything about how to do something, but let me tell you, when you have an event like what's occurring now, some people say we are in war, right? And some people say we know gas prices. That's clear. But if you just take those things and just think of like a big rock being thrown in the middle of a pool, and you got the big wave, but you also got all these other little waves, and they come at different times. And then you got the big wave bouncing off the walls of the pool and then going back the other way and then canceling out things. That's the way real estate investing is, and probably all investing. And we got to figure out, how does that affect us? How does that affect what my roadmap is, which I think we were going to try to talk about roadmaps. Well, how does that affect my roadmap? What should my roadmap be? What does that roadmap look like? Where are the turns on that roadmap? And we have to be students of this. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And if you stop being a student, it's going to cost you money, time, maybe a future. So we've got to be students of this, and that's probably the most powerful thing that an association does for you. And that's not a networking meeting. That's That's different.
Now, another thing that the RIA brings is community. That you can have a sense of community and support. You don't have to go about this business alone.
Right. I tell this story all the time. When we first started, I was part of the Rich Club, and the Rich Club, as y'all know, doesn't exist anymore, or at least it doesn't exist in its own right like it used to. But so when I first started, about 10 of us would go to dinner on a regular basis. And what was interesting is, out of that 10, 2 have died. The rest still are either heavily involved in real estate or living off the real estate they bought during that time now, because they're 30 years later, 35 years later, and I know all of them. And it made a big difference. And what was interesting is, those people, because they stayed connected, they're still the beneficiaries of what real estate does for them. And I think that's proof. I mean, it's hard to know what is real and what's true and what's right when you either have no experience, or you've been doing it for 1 or 2, 3 years, or you haven't gone through market cycles. You don't know what reality is. When you've done that and you've seen it with your own eyes, then you're thinking, hey, these gas prices make a difference. That market report that they're doing, I need to understand what that means. And when we do a market report, like with our RIA, we don't just say, here's the data. We're saying like, okay, here's the data. This is what's happening because of the data, or this is what's causing that data to look like that. And that's really important. So did you want to talk about the other 5 reasons or the other 4 reasons of the 5?
Yeah, I was gonna have you. I was gonna give you a limit, minute for each one.
Okay, so I got to go fast now.
Yeah.
So cash flow, we talked about that. I mean, that's the most basic, simplest thing, and that took 25 minutes. So equity capture, you buy equity when you find a motivated seller or a problem. And it may not be equity that you can take to the bank and refinance, because you can refinance equity if it's provable. But imagine you're an expert at turning around broken down houses and making them produce. That you're doing something that not everybody can do, especially do it successfully. And if you're first starting, you're not going to be good at it. You're going to spend $40,000 doing something that might take $20,000, or you're going to spend $40,000 when you should have spent $20,000. So equity capture is real important, and it's basically, we're going to take something that's not producing or it's underproducing. We're going to make it produce at a higher level. We know net operating income means, we already said this, a rise in net operating income means an increase in value. So you can buy equity or you can buy potential equity, but it's our job to convert that potential equity or equity into real money or into real equity. So equity capture, that's what you can do with real estate. You can, just in the simplest terms, you have something out there that should be worth 150 and you can buy it for 100, or something that's worth 1.5 and you can buy it for 1 million. So if you know how to do that, you become a student of that, then you're going to get the benefit of that. So the next one, of course, is appreciation. Appreciation, if the value goes up 10% a year, it's let's say it's worth $100,000. That means it goes up to $110,000. If you had $10,000 in that, then your value of your asset went up to $110,000, even though you have $10,000. So your return on your investment's 100%. That's pretty powerful, and it can go up more. And when you look at appreciation last year of being around 20%, that's big. And the year before it was 10%. This year is supposed to be 10%. When we're doing our comps, and we're masters at doing comps, and any real estate investor needs to become that's several things you have to own as a real estate investor. Knowing how to value properties is one of the things you have to own, in my opinion. Whether you're a passive investor or active investor, you better know how to do that part right. And we talk a lot about that. We show, like in our coaching calls, we actually go through the steps. We show the process. It's not a little thing, it's a big thing. Getting that data, knowing what the real values are or what they can be is one of the first most important things you have to do. So knowing how to calculate that value, we spend a lot of time on. With the appreciation occurring like it has, we go back, when we're doing comps, we don't even go back 6 months a lot of times. We just try to go back 3 months. Sometimes we can't. It gets more complicated because we know it's increasing in value. There are a lot of guys who are really incompetent at getting rehabs done on time. They're getting to the closing table, and if they're selling it, for example, they're finding out, oh my gosh, this is worth a lot more than when I first started this thing 6 months ago. And that's what's happening in the market. Is it going to continue to do this? I don't know the answer. We've got some good guesses, but you get appreciation in some markets, or you get appreciations for things that are in the path of progress. So work on both of those things. Always think about that for appreciation.
So I'm going to ask a question here, and hopefully you give a quick answer.
Okay.
I'm not going to say the quick question thing again. In the past, you've always, taught, and it's never been a good idea to buy or make a decision solely on appreciation. But over the past couple of years, with the rate of appreciation, has that influenced you making a decision on the property? Like, if we weren't in these times, would you normally have passed on a property, but you ended up taking a property because of the appreciation rate?
One of the things is you come to these networking meetings and you hang out with people that are doing what you're doing, you learn 10 times as much as you would on your own, right? Because you've got 10 people, say, produce at the rate you do. Now you're learning at a hyper rate. And that's what's so powerful to me with networking, because I do reach out to my buddies. I ask them, what are you seeing? How do you see it? And it forces you to rethink your things. What scares me about appreciation is it's hard to always predict. But when we started doing the market reports and we started looking at data like how inventory is not being replaced, how demographic trends show that people are moving to different places. I mean, it's not, I was talking to Drew the other day, who wholesales a lot of property. And if you're out there, Drew Nguyen, hi, how are you? And he was telling me about all the California investors that are making offers on properties, and they're making cash offers on these properties. We just put a property up for sale. We had over 20 offers, and we ended up selling it to an iBuyer. That was our best offer. And the other offers most of the offers that we had were above our asking price. And so when you're in a market like that, you gotta, if you're a student of it, you're gonna say, well, what's causing this? When you have 1 month of inventory in a particular asset class, and just so you know, if you don't know, the general rule of thumb is a market that's in equilibrium. In other words, it's got a good balance between buyers and sellers. Then that means supply and demand are in equilibrium. That means in real estate, that usually means a 6-month inventory of product. Right now, it's 1 month. It's 1 to 2 months. So it's not in equilibrium. So it's totally a seller's market. So as a seller, when you hear that data, then you got to ask yourself, well, what does that mean? Do I need to do that $40,000 rehab? Do I need to do that $20,000 rehab? And those kinds of things, when you listen to it and you're around it, and you're multiplying your knowledge times all your buddies' knowledge that are doing the same things, and you're getting their feedback, it gives you the confidence to do what we're doing. We've got a property right now that we're doing, and instead of doing a $100,000 rehab like a lot of the guys in the neighborhood, we're doing a $40,000 to $50,000 rehab. And it changed our attitude and we're taking a little bit of a gamble, but if we're wrong, it's going to cost us 10 or 20%. But if we're right, it's going to save us 30% or 20% of what we would have spent otherwise. And these guys, if a lot of people do what I did, I was really heavily involved in the RIA, and then I kind of dropped out for 10 years. Meanwhile, the world changed, right? The Tom Berries came along and said, hey, I want to do it this way. And I wasn't at the table when he was at the table paying attention. And so and if you can come this afternoon, he's going to do an afternoon session. Definitely come to it, because he's going to talk about how he did that, how he scaled to 400 doors, how he got the 400 doors, scaling alone and just running that kind of operation in the time frame that he ran it is. I will be there because I want to know what he did internally to accomplish that. Did he have acquisition managers? Did he use VAs? Did he use processes? What software did he use? I want to know those kinds of things. And if you're operating with a lot of doors, you want to know that. If you don't have a lot of doors, you want to know how to do that, and you want to know how a person gets in that position. So anyway, that's probably another rabbit hole. So appreciation, I hope. You said you're going to time me, but then you never looked at your watch again. I don't know if you're falling asleep or you're listening to me intently.
No, see that's the thing about you. You know that you answer questions in your content. Your rabbit holes are just so entertaining and they're valuable.
I remember the first time I met Tom. I think it was right after Ike. We were in the same subdivision, and he was rehabbing a house across the street from a house we were rehabbing, and we both happened to be out there at the same time. I met him and his wife, and they're very, I have nothing but respect for Tom and his wife.
So let's talk about mortgage reduction.
Well, I'll keep this one simple. I mean, it's just basic math. If you buy a property and you borrow money to buy it, in other words, you're not taking the bulk of the money out of your pocket, and the tenant pays that debt off, how can you beat that? In fact, if you look at, now see, I'm going down, I can already feel me slipping into that rabbit hole. But I mean, I remember negotiating a deal with for a friend of ours. He was one of our private lenders. he was negotiating a deal for, I think, $3 million, and he asked me to help him sit at the table because it was, it was a pretty complicated thing, and and I realized this guy had worked in that location his whole career, and when he got ready to sell it, and he had 10 to 20 people working at him various times, when he got ready to sell that property, and he retired, he didn't retire on the money he was making on the job. He ended up retiring on the money he made on the real estate. And he never bought that real estate thinking that that was his retirement plan. And it's like, it's one of those things, the harder I work, the luckier I get. But I mean, you think about it, McDonald's doesn't make money selling hamburgers. They make money paying for real estate with the hamburgers.
Is that why you like to wear that hat that says "Live Lucky"?
Yes, yes, that's my favorite. And demand luck, demand it around everybody and everything. Always demand luck, and you'll get it. Ask for it; they'll give it to you. I know that's kind of stupid, but I totally believe in that. And tax advantages is the last one. So, and just to summarize what they are: cash flow, equity capture, appreciation, mortgage reduction, and tax advantages. Tax advantages is important because there's real tax advantages and real benefits you get. I mean, think about it. The guys that write the rules also own a lot of real estate. So they're writing the rules to benefit them. And so we're kind of swimming upstream, or we're downstream. I mean, we're swimming with the current. And that's what you want to do. If you want to go up current, you're probably not going to make as much progress. You probably get tired, and good chance you'll drown. So swim with the current. And the tax advantages are out there. There's things like depreciation, 1031 tax deferred exchange. We're Transact Title, where we hold our meetings, and they specialize in investor related transactions, commercial transactions, and they also do 1031 tax deferred exchanges. This is just a way of using the government's money to help you get a better return on your properties. And the rules are there for us. So the tax benefits. The other thing is, imagine being an investor or a lender, or let's say somebody wants to get into real estate and you have a lot of money and you have high income. A lot of times we can move some of these tax benefits over to the person with a high income in order to participate in the deal, to improve their yield even more. So tax benefits, when you're a beginning investor, you're doing everything you can to survive. But when you get a few assets and more experience, one of the first things you're going to look for is lenders. You're going to look for private lenders to help fund your deals. In fact, hopefully we'll have time to talk a little bit about our meeting with Kent, but you're going to start looking for money. And that's why in Calm, it's KALM. And like with our students, we're saying, okay, this is what you're about. These are the 4 things we're going to do. We're going to work on your attitude. We're going to work on your knowledge. We're going to show you how to get leads right. And we're going to show you how to get money and use money. And we'll bring money to the table too, a lot of times for our students. But you got to get the money thing, the money right. And when you start getting intermediate to advanced, you're going to be wanting to attract lenders to the table, or partners, people who have money, because moving fast and having money to do transactions gets you at the head of the line when a deal comes up. So our job is, when we get these leads, the deals come up, we got to have money. All right. And I mean, that's why we have lenders as sponsors in our network.
Just like that deal you brought up just a minute ago, where you sold to an iBuyer.
Right.
You sold it to them. You could have sold it to somebody else and got a higher price.
No.
But you sold to them, because they weren't necessarily the highest. They were the strongest.
Yeah, they were the best offer. They were the strongest. And it was not the highest offer, by the way. We could have, there's reasons beyond the scope of this call, or this radio show, or the amount of time we have left. But yeah, we had to go with the strongest offer, and they weren't the highest. They were very high, but they weren't the highest. So, but by the way, what is an iBuyer, right? An iBuyer is a person that's out there aggregating billions of dollars, usually, and they're buying real estate with those billions of dollars. So there's a need for lenders to get in real estate. A lot of the lenders understand it, and they're taking advantage of it, or they're using that as an opportunity. One good thing about being a lender in a real estate transaction is if you start small, then you can actually see the property you're loaning on, if it's a property. if that's the way you're doing it. That's a common way. We had Kent from Equity Trust come in, and Kent is managing his company is managing $32 billion in retirement accounts. Where they're different than everybody else is it's called self-directed. And now a lot of people out there advertising we're self-directed. And what that means is you get to pick the mutual fund or the equity fund. You get to pick that, but that's all as far as you can go. Self-directed, that company like Kent, which is Equity Trust, manages. Self-directed means you can, if James came to me and said, loan me $100,000, then you can go to James and say, James, show me the asset. And then you go out there, you look at it, show me the numbers you're looking at, show me what the value is. Okay, here's $100K for your deal. So as a self-directed account, and this one company has 32 billion, they're the largest, and they're a national RIA, sponsor, which we're a member of. So as a sponsor, they're vetted. They have a great super reputation. They're a trust company, which means that they're audited several times a year. Different facets of what they do are audited, and if I set up the account in a self-directed IRA account like Equity Trust, and James says, loan me $100,000 or partner with me on $100,000, I can allocate whatever amount that him and I agree, and I'm really self-directing that IRA. That's very, very powerful. And if you have money sitting on the sideline and you're not doing that, you need to learn more about it. You need to try to understand it better. And we talk about that stuff. And when we talk about calm, knowledge, attitude, leads, money, and we talk about the money part of it, we talk a lot about that. When I'm doing like a 2-day class, I'll probably spend 4 to 5 hours on the money, because ultimately real estate, it's nice to say you own that property or how many doors you own, but if you're not managing the money part of the equation properly, you're either leaving a lot on the table or you're not going to stay in business.
Well, it's more about knowing, how and where to get the money, and how money works and how you can use it to work for you. But we just got a buzz in our ear that we got to move on. So Ray, wanted to ask you a couple of questions here and kind of guide our listeners if they're either new to the business or maybe they're, been in for a little bit and they just want to get to the next level. They're struggling. But as we've mentioned, Tom Berry is here talking today how he built his portfolio of 400 doors in just 4 years. If you were just going to get started today, and I know we had something similar to this recently, but if you were just going to jump in and get started today, how would you do it? And what would it look like to you?
So if you didn't ask about somebody's intermediate or advanced level, but I consider myself advanced. And so I go to meetings and I'm surrounded by people who are all over the place, beginners, intermediate, or advanced. I was a big fan of Jack Miller. And I learned from those. And when I make a mistake, it costs me $50,000 now. It might cause me to lose a house if I don't do something right. It can really hurt. If you're beginning, where it's going to cost you is you spend too much time on the wrong things and you're not working on the right things. So like in our program or our coaching now, so if you're in a RIA that content based and does good networking, just make sure you go to those. In ours, that's what we try to provide. If somebody wants to be a coaching student, then that's a more accelerated thing. And I don't think you have to do that necessarily, but I think you have to be around the people that are doing what you want to do. That's the bottom line. If you want to become a great bicycler, join a bicycle club. And you might not want to ride with the guys that can go 18 and 19 miles an hour, because you will die of a heart attack like in the first 30 minutes, right? So you might need to start with the beginner part of that. But in our calls, I want to be in the room with all of them, because even the beginners can bring some things to the table. Oftentimes they can't when it comes to specific things on how to do stuff, but that's the time they need to be quiet and learn and listen. And so, like in our calls, we try to always have mastermind sessions, and we always try to have like a topic like contracts 101, contracts 201, and just how to do different things, how lead generation. So we'll be talking about those things. But if you're a beginner, you got to decide what path you want to take. If you want to find out, like, hey, I just want to understand in general terms a little bit about how this works, then go to a RIA group who has content and who has networking. If you're already advanced, I don't have to tell you that mistake you made on that last deal cost you $20,000. That contractor you got because you didn't vet them right and you didn't use the right contract, that cost you all your profit in the deal. So the guys that are doing it, they already know the value of education. You don't have to tell them that. We've had engineers as students, and engineers really usually have very focused knowledge. They know how to overcome things. They know how to be technical. And even engineers we struggle with because engineers make up their mind too quick. They're trying to make quick decisions when there's a big body of knowledge. And even as an engineer, you got to be careful. I mean, we got a lot of times hit the engineers over the head with a 2x4 and say, just shut up listening to yourself. Here's why it's right. And the engineer should have a obligation to say, well, tell me why you're right. And if you're around me, I'll say, like, unless you guys have a better plan, we're doing it this way. And I always say that. And that's the time for them to tell me they have a better plan. But if you're a leader, and that's what we need to be for our own portfolio, is be the leader of our portfolio, leader of our plan. So I don't know if I answered your question very well, but I would say it depends on who you are, what your background is, what your resources are, what your talent is. Each one of those things, you're going to have to behave in a different way. You know, and some people, like, I grew up working on houses with my stepdad. So I was in my comfort zone, and probably being in my comfort zone was more important than anything else because it meant that I was going to stay with it. And I stayed with it, maybe the rehabbing part, too much and too long, but it also helped me be successful because I was comfortable in that. I was willing to do that. So if you're an introvert and we try to get you in a position where, hey, go do this thing and only extroverts can do it, then you're probably not going to be successful at that. And so that's the wrong approach to that person. So I think you have to look at what that person's talents are, what their traits are, what their character makeup is, and then you have to find out what their goals are, what their ambitions are, what their resources are, and then you got to come up with a kind of a roadmap for that person. But I would say there's some basic elements that's common to every roadmap. One, if you're not passionate about it, either make yourself passionate or do something you're passionate about. Be passionate. Hang around people that are doing it, not talking about it, not at one of these beer drinking contests that they call a networking meeting and everybody's trying to brag about how important they are. Talk about the details, talk about the specifics of why you do this, why you don't do this, how you do this. You'll see, like, if you're around me and I'm around somebody that's really talented on something, like something, I am like a machine. I mean, I am pulling every little pearl of wisdom out of their brain that I can. And that's, in my opinion, that's how you need to be, because is that something we're going to take on next week? You know, we had this rent relief stuff was real important for us because we had rental properties. And a buddy called me up and said, hey, Ray, are you aware of what's going on with this? And I said, no. And it was a government-backed program, right? So we were already like, maybe this is not for us, or we're not going to get too involved in it. But then he took the time and explained it in detail, specifics, how we set it up. And that next day, I got Brenda, who works in our office, and she's a superstar. And I said, Brenda, we need to become an expert on this. And she was the right person to say that to, because she became an expert, and that made a huge difference in our bottom line. And if I wouldn't have had that engagement, that networking, that kind of relationship with that person where I could drill them to death and get the answers, we would have never been able to pull off what we did just in that. So we went through this rent problem where a lot of landlords have been put out of business because they didn't understand about how rent relief worked. They never took the time or energy, and they didn't have a reason to take the time or energy because nobody ever told them how it works and how to put it together and what the value of it was.
So just really quick to run through, kind of like what Ray had mentioned there, roadmap to your next deal. You know, network, build relationships. You know, for fast track, get a mentor, if that's something you need. Marketing and lead generation, finding the deals, you know, and get the deals, you know, and then structure the deal, close the deal.
Be around the people doing what you want to
Yeah.
do. That's really, really important because when you run into that hole and you feel like you don't have control, and you're around people who have proven to you that they can do it, and you're confident that they're doing it on a regular basis, it gives you that courage to keep fighting for that outcome, and that's what MFO is about. That's all our successful partners, students, all the people I've been around my whole life, they are MFOs. 100% of them are MFOs. They don't know how to take no for an answer. And if you're not pushing me back, you're probably not a good candidate, right? You got to push back. You got to challenge me to prove that I'm right in what I say. If you're not challenging me, you're not good for me either. I want you to challenge me. When I first committed to becoming an expert at negotiating, which is about 10 years ago, I really committed to it. I started saying things that I didn't totally understand. And it's like, how do you know that? How can you're saying that, but is that really true? Because you read it in some book. Anyway.
So we're about to wrap up the show here very, very shortly. To get any information that we've talked about, any of our upcoming events, we do have you're actually teaching a negotiating class
March 26th.
March 26th
Yeah.
in 2 weeks. You can find information on that on massivepassiveshow.com. That's massivepassiveshow.com. Next week, I believe we're going to have Ernie Garcia on.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Talking about evictions and things like that. And then we have Peter Fortunato coming to town.
Yeah,
coming
we
up
got a
soon.
promise to him. And
Yeah.
by the way, I will bow at his feet. He's my hero. He's one of my mentors. So and then
again-
this afternoon, of course, we got
Yeah, we have Tom Berry. So we look forward to seeing you very soon. MassivePassiveShow.com.